The molten sky of Vorthkal rippled with electrical scars, weaving lightning trails over the forge-laced ridges like veins of furious thought. Metal-laced dust shimmered in the red twilight, and far below that furious sky, nestled within the obsidian bones of the moon, the sacred forge temple rumbled with anticipation. Jamie adjusted his denim jacket and squinted at the steam-hazed transport window. The suit-clad Terran scientist next to him spoke in hushed tones, parsing quantum forge readings and orbital tidal plasma forecasts. Jamie had nothing to contribute. His wristpad buzzed with a reminder. Peanut butter sandwich, still in the Ziploc, uneaten. "I'm going to smell like a lunchbox," he muttered, adjusting the strap on his translator unit as the shuttle landed. He didn't expect anyone to respond, but the silence in the cabin had gone heavy. When the bay doors opened, the heat hit like an open oven, and the reverence like a cathedral. Rows of six-limbed alien smiths in black and silver tunics bowed low to greet them, the glowing veins in their arms pulsing in unison. The air smelled of burnt copper and ozone. A high chime rang out. From the corridor of rippling metal arches, a figure emerged taller than the rest, bearing a flowing mantle of alloyed fibers and a mask shaped like a warhammer head. 4 arms crossed over his chest, 2 hung at his side like loose cables. His voice vibrated with layered harmonics as he spoke. "I am Master Krivnex. You walk now within the eternal core, seat of the impossible forge. Tread with respect." Jamie blinked. "Impossible forge?" he mouthed to himself. The envoy leader, Dr. Solana, bowed. "We are honored. Our mission is purely observational." Krivnex made a slow arc with his upper right arm, gesturing for them to follow. They descended through corridors that pulsed with radiant heat, past molten rivers guided by anti-grav fields, and entered a vast chamber carved into a massive geode. Suspended above a bottomless pit was a single anvil, floating on an axis of gravitational inversions. Crystalline forge hammers circled it like moons. Krivnex stepped onto the platform and raised a shimmering sheet of metal the size of a door. It rippled like water, despite being solid. "Impossible steel," he intoned, "forged under tidal plasma shifts, compressed in zero-point crucibles, cooled in neutron brine, and shaped with anti-gravitic resonance. It survives supernovae, resists entropy decay, the pinnacle of metallurgical evolution." He turned toward the humans. "And you?" Jamie, who hadn't said a word in hours, squinted at the metal slab. He stepped forward slowly, ignoring Dr. Solana's alarmed glance. "Kinda looks like Damascus," he said. The room fell into silence so dense it felt gravitational. Krivnex turned, slowly. "Damascus?" The word came out like a curse spat through steel grates. "Yeah," Jamie said, pulling up an image on his wristpad. "Damascus steel, ancient, Middle East. You know, folded steel, high carbon patterns, really strong. Beautiful stuff. My dad makes it on weekends." Krivnex's mask didn't move, but his posture stiffened. No planetary species could pattern metallurgy at a quantum lattice without energy fields. "Oh, we didn't," Jamie said with a shrug. "We used fire, hammers, elbow grease, sometimes a leaf blower to stoke the forge." Krivnex's lower left hand flexed, like he just grabbed a live wire. The forge smiths began murmuring to each other in ultrasonic bursts. Even the anvil seemed to hum differently. "You make folded hypermetal in your own dwelling?" Krivnex asked slowly. "Well, my dad does. Backyard forge. Propane. Anvils from a guy in Wisconsin. He learned from a Japanese swordsmith. They fold the steel hundreds of times. Gets this crazy grain structure." Krivnex stepped down from the platform. His 4 eyes blinked asynchronously. "You will provide a sample. Immediately." Jamie's smile was mild. "Sure, I'll call my dad." Back in orbit, Jamie sent the transmission from the shuttle. It took 3 days for the quantum channel to stabilize, and another 10 for the parcel to arrive, a small crate, battered and taped shut, packed with a greasy kitchen towel. Nestled inside was a chef's knife, with fluid black patterns across the blade. Folded over 300 times, it shimmered with layered complexity. Krivnex didn't allow anyone else near it. He spent 2 full days running harmonic stress tests, cross-dimensional lattice resonance scans, impact resilience trials, and subatomic alignment metrics. Then he repeated them. He built a new scanner from scratch, doubting the old ones. He dissected a sliver of the handle. He performed acoustic feedback trials and ferroconductive pressure bursts. He ran out of disbelief before he ran out of tests. How? He asked, voice soft now, stripped of the layered bravado. Jamie leaned on the edge of the scanner table. There's a rhythm to it. Fold, heat, hammer, cool, repeat. Each layer presses carbon differently, builds up grain tension, adds flexibility. You've got to listen to the color of the metal, know when it sings. That is not scientific. Nope, Jamie agreed. It's craftsmanship. You feel it. He hesitated, then pulled up an old clip from his wrist pad. It showed a much younger man, covered in sweat, bowing deeply to an elderly Japanese smith who stood silently beside a glowing katana blade. That's my dad, 40 years ago, stationed in Japan, spent years learning. That smith master Genkuro never spoke a word of English. Still taught him everything. Krivnik stared at the image for a long time. The silence was different now, not dismissive, almost reverent. 2 days later, a transmission came through Earth's diplomatic channel. Incoming visitation request. Master Krivnex of Vorthkal seeks planetary entry. Purpose: metallurgical apprenticeship. Location: Earth Sector 17A. North American subzone. Jamie nearly dropped his sandwich. The backyard forge smelled like oil, heat, and slightly scorched pine mulch. Jamie's dad, Mike, was already stoking the fire when Krivnex arrived, towering, armored, hunched slightly from the transport trip. He carried a backpack the size of a washing machine and a crate of raw meteorite chunks. Mike glanced up, squinted, and nodded once. "You want to learn?" he asked. Krivnex straightened. Mike tossed him an apron. "Start by sweeping the floor." Krivnex stared at the broom like it was a ceremonial relic. Jamie watched from the porch with a glass of lemonade and muttered, "Welcome to Minnesota." Krivnex swept. Badly. He knocked over a bench. He caught his second left arm in the tool rack. He tried to grip tongs backward, scorched the hem of his forge apron, and melted a billet when he didn't wait for the steel to normalize. Mike didn't flinch. "You burned it," he said flatly. "I followed the temperature parameters." "You didn't listen." Krivnex growled in 3 pitches. Then, a week later, he inhaled forge flux fumes without a mask. Jamie spent the next 6 hours driving him to the ER, where the attending doctor nearly fainted. Krivnex's airways required a humidified chamber and 3 liters of oxygenated plasma substrate. He remained bedridden for 3 weeks. Jamie brought him ice chips and played lo-fi playlists. "You ever think of using a respirator?" Jamie asked. "I assumed it was ornamental," Krivnex rasped. When he recovered, he returned to the forge and didn't complain once. By the 2nd month, he could tell 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit from 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit by hue alone. By the 3rd, he could fold a billet with all 6 limbs, each blow precise and balanced. He began humming during work deep harmonic overtones that somehow matched the anvil strikes. By the 4th month, he called Mike Sensei without irony. And then the real work began. By the time the trees shed their last yellow leaves over the backyard, Krivnex could start the forge unassisted. He still wore the apron awkwardly. His center limbs didn't fit the loops properly, but his motions had taken on a measured rhythm. The clumsy uncertainty from his first weeks had been smelted out by repetition. He no longer asked what every tool did. He used them. Improvised, even. He shortened a pair of tongs with his fusion torch, reshaped a hammer's grip for his claw, and built a custom quenching tub with a pressure-regulated stir system to simulate Vorthkal glacial currents. Mike just grunted when he saw it. "Not bad. Still doesn't beat a good stir with a poker and a beer in your offhand." Krivnex didn't argue anymore. He'd started to understand that wasn't the point. That fall, Jamie helped his dad build a steel awning over the forge to keep snow off the anvils. Krivnex, arms glinting with heat-hardened sweat, hauled the sheet metal himself. The local hardware store clerk took a photo with him. "You the alien blacksmith?" she asked, stunned. Krivnex blinked all 4 eyes. "I am a student," he said, without hesitation. And he meant it. He learned not just how to fold steel, but how to wait. That had been the hardest part. "You rush it," Mike would say, watching him over his mug of lukewarm coffee. "You got all the theory in the world, but you don't trust your hands yet. Or the fire." I do not trust randomness. It ain't random, Mike said. It's real. There's a difference. Krivnex grew quiet after that. A week later, he tried a billet with no calculations, no spectral analysis, just heat, color, and timing. The blade cracked halfway through the fold. He threw the tongs across the yard, one of his sidearms flaring in frustration. Jamie leaned against the shed, arms crossed. You know how many of mine snapped? I made 3 perfect cheese knives before Dad let me even look at a sword blank. Krivnex stared at the fractured steel, breathing slow and heavy. Then he picked up the broom and swept the shards. That night, they had pizza on the porch. Krivnex used a dull butter knife with extreme care. Jamie's friend from town, Marcus, came over with a 6-pack. Mike cracked a beer and handed one cold and sweating to Krivnex. The alien sniffed it, hesitated, then tilted the can with one claw. He drank with intense suspicion. He blinked, then shuddered once. This is medicinal? Nope, Mike said. It's light beer. I see. A cleansing ritual. Nope. Krivnex drank 3 more. The next morning, he showed up to the forge, groaning like an overloaded pressure valve, wearing polarized lenses and asking if the birds could cease their acoustic hostilities. Mike just handed him a bucket and said, "Quench tank's got scale buildup. Get scrubbin'." By late November, they began assembling the new forge. Mike had been skeptical when Krivnex proposed it, a fusion of human and Vorthkal techniques, but he came around when Krivnex sketched the airflow system. They scavenged scrap from a decommissioned agricultural drone, pulled bricks from a defunct pizza parlor, and bought a high-grade forge fan online. Mike taught Krivnex how to use a pipe bender, and Krivnex taught Mike how to bind metals with microgravity welds using a stabilizer ring from his old shuttle. You know, Mike said, wiping sweat from his neck. You're not half bad. I am 3/4 determined, Krivnex replied. Jamie's mom, who worked nights at the county hospital, brought them lemonade one afternoon. She handed Krivnex a cold cloth for his overheated lower arms and insisted he drink water instead of plasma tonic. He obeyed without a word. You're looking a little worn, she told him. You getting enough sleep? I am dreaming of steel, Krivnex said, eyes heavy. She smirked. That's called burnout. It's not noble. Krivnex blinked slowly. Acknowledged. He took a nap on a lawn chair under a heat lamp later that day. By December, the forge was ready. They named it Twin Hearth, one chamber earth style, the other Vorthkal. The coals shared a central intake. It was beautiful. Ugly in the way only hard-working machines could be. Lumpy welds, stained bricks, one corner that slouched slightly from a bent beam, but it sang when lit. And that winter, as snow blanketed the trees in thick folds, they began work on a new blade. Not just any blade. A fusion blade. The billet was strange from the start. Krivnex brought a sample of ultra-dense meteorite from a Vorthkal impact crater. Mike contributed high-carbon steel he'd made from reclaimed rail spikes. They laid the layers together in alternating strips, fluxed it with a hybrid compound of borax and cryoslag, and began the folding. Each fold took hours, heating in the earth chamber, then flipping to Vorthkal resonance fields for harmonic alignment, then back to the anvil for hammering. Mike handled the hammerwork first. His blows were deliberate, rhythmic. He muttered under his breath like he was counting heartbeats. Then Krivnex stepped in. His blows were heavier, slower, but with each pass the billet changed. Patterns emerged, waveforms that shimmered when viewed at an angle, lines that didn't quite follow normal geometry. The grain danced, steel and stone sang together. Jamie filmed every moment. There were arguments, of course there were. You're rushing the cool phase, Mike barked. You are underheating the Vorthkal alignment. It needs trust. At one point, Krivnex stormed out and paced the snowy yard, leaving 6-limbed prints in the powder. Jamie found him staring at the tree line. I am unqualified. Yeah, Jamie said. We all are. That's the point. Krivnex returned, silently. 2 weeks later, the blade was finished. It hummed faintly in its sheath. It shimmered when drawn, not in color, but in intent. The way the layers caught the light was hypnotic, fluid, and sharp, echoing both Damascus folds and Vorthkal harmonics. The edge could cut wire on contact. The spine was flexible enough to bend against a brick wall. Mike held it up. This, he said, is art. Krivnek stepped forward. We should name it. Jamie raised an eyebrow. We? We forged it together. Mike looked at Krivnex. You got something in mind? Krivnex hesitated, then said in a low voice, Kamurai. It means, born of two fires. They agreed it was perfect. That night, they had grilled bratwursts. Krivnex tried one, then three. He had no idea what mustard was, and declared it molecularly suspect, but finished his plate anyway. They played blues rock through the shop speakers. Krivnex sat by the forge, watching the coals die down, all four eyes reflecting the ember light. I once believed only exotic forces could shape true steel, he said quietly. Mike didn't look up from his beer. And now? Now I know. Patience, heat, willing hands. That is enough. Jamie smiled. Across the forge, Kamurai rested in its stand, gleaming like a shared promise. Snow still blanketed the Minnesota ground when Jamie came home one morning to find Master Krivnex curled under the porch heater with a stack of sticky notes, a legal pad, and Mike's old welding textbook. He had a magnifying lens clipped to his left eye and a cup of instant coffee balanced precariously in one claw. Why are you up? Jamie asked, holding a half-eaten banana. Krivnex's voice was rough. I am researching contests. Like fighting? No forging. Jamie set the banana down. You mean the regional blade show? Krivnex nodded without looking up. Earth celebrates craftsmanship in public displays of assessment. I wish to enter Kamurai. Jamie sat beside him, pulling his hoodie tighter. It's not a science fair, it's a smithing contest. Most people enter with stuff like kitchen knives and hunting blades. Yours is a cross-dimensional collaboration. Then it is eligible. By the time Mike shuffled out of the house in his bathrobe with a thermos of black coffee, Krivnex had already submitted the online application, using Jamie's name as a co-entrant. The regional contest was in Duluth, held inside a converted shipping hangar beside Lake Superior. When the confirmation email arrived, Mike stared at it for a long moment. You're dragging me to Duluth in February. Krivnex stood straighter. For recognition. Mike grunted. Recognition's overrated. Cold isn't. Still, 2 weeks later, they loaded up the truck with forged tools, a display case, and the blade sealed in a custom carrier built from scrap aluminum and inertium foam. Jamie drove. Krivnex, wearing a thermal blanket and sunglasses, rode shotgun with his claws tucked beneath the seatbelt. Mike sat in the back, reading a crossword and muttering about potholes. The hangar was already bustling when they arrived. Tables lined the concrete floor, some gleaming with polished blades, others showcasing rustic hatchets and carving tools. There were hand-forged machetes, art knives, axes, and even a sword made entirely from melted-down car parts. Krivnex carried Kamurai's case like it was holy. He set it on their table and unlocked the latches slowly. The blade rested on a cloth of black suede. Its layered pattern seemed to shimmer with depth beyond the surface, like staring into moving water. The judges hadn't even begun making rounds yet, but the smiths at nearby tables were already drifting over. One man in a trucker hat whistled. That's some wild pattern welding. Never seen anything like it. Jamie nodded. You won't. A tall woman with soot-streaked cheeks squinted at the fuller. Did you laser temper that? Krivnex shook his head. It was heat cycled through binary chamber systems. Pattern folding was done manually. With guidance. By hand? She said, skeptically. Mike stepped forward. All 6 of them. They laughed, then stared, then laughed again. The contest wasn't until noon, so they walked the floor. Krivnex took notes on edge bevels. He asked detailed questions about folding jigs and rotary forges. A retired smith offered him a hot cocoa and tried to sell him a hammer made from titanium railroad scrap. Krivnex declined politely, but examined the welds with focused interest. Then came the demonstrations. Mike volunteered Krivnex to test the edge retention booth. You did what? Jamie asked. Relax, Mike said. He needs the experience. They handed Krivnex a steel bar and asked him to cut through a hanging hemp rope, then slice a copper pipe, and finally shave curls off a hardwood dowel, all without touching the edge with anything abrasive. Kamurai didn't just pass. It sang. Each cut left behind an edge as clean as surgical steel. When Krivnex handed the blade back, the event official examined it under a loupe and said, Didn't even roll the edge. "What alloy is this?" Krivnex answered simply, "It is not an alloy, it is a bond." The crowd didn't know what that meant, but they clapped anyway. By the time the judging began, Kamurai had a small audience. A judge in a sport coat leaned in, adjusted his glasses, and examined the blade's surface with visible fascination. "What's the forging method?" "Tenja," Jamie explained. "Folded steel, layered meteorite, high carbon rail spike base, alternating heating chambers, zero artificial alignment scans." The judge scribbled notes. "And the name?" "Kamurai," Krivnex said. "It means born of two fires," Jamie finished. The judge paused, then nodded once. "It fits." They didn't win first place. That went to an 84-year-old smith who forged a Damascus Bowie knife with a handle carved from the tooth of a fossilized dire wolf. Deservedly. But Kamurai won judges' artistic merit, and best experimental blade, and crowd favorite. On the drive home, Mike finally smiled. "That old fossil tooth guy earned it," he said. "But you changed the game." Krivnex didn't respond. He was asleep in the front seat, his upper limbs slack, a faint rattle in his exhale, like cooling embers. Back home, the forge stayed cold for a week. Mike insisted on a break. Krivnex didn't object. Instead, he sat on the porch with Jamie, drinking tea and watching the snow melt from the gutters. Jamie scrolled through the footage from the contest. Slow-motion slices, crowd reactions, even the moment the judge announced the award. Krivnex leaned over. "You are keeping these for archival purposes?" Jamie shrugged. "Just memories." There was a pause. "I must return to Vorthkal soon." Jamie lowered the tablet. "You serious?" Krivnex nodded. "The cycles align. My forge house will expect record of my pilgrimage, and my findings." Mike stepped outside, holding a bowl of chili and 2 spoons. He caught the tail end of the conversation. "You going already?" "It is time." Mike didn't argue, just sat down, handed over a spoon, and said, "Then you better leave something behind." That afternoon, they forged together one last time. Not a blade. A kitchen knife. A simple chef's tool with a high curved edge and a thick tang. Folded once, nothing exotic, just earth steel, earth hands, and earth fire. Krivnex etched a small sigil into the tang, an ancient Vorthkal mark meaning shared. He wrapped it in a towel and handed it to Jamie. "For nourishment," he said, "and remembrance." Jamie held the blade with quiet reverence. Before Krivnex left, he gave Mike a thin sheet of alloy, folded like origami. On it, in both English and Vorthkal glyphs, was written a contract of apprenticeship, signed in planetary ink and fingerprinted in grease smudges. Mike read it twice. "You put me down as Forge Father," he said. Krivnex gave a slow nod. It felt appropriate. Mike folded the sheet and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Damn right it is." Jamie drove him to the departure terminal the next morning. The ship looked like a polished stone, wrapped in blue light. Krivnex stood in front of the boarding ramp, all 6 limbs flexed, the morning frost clinging to his shoulders. "I will return," he said. Jamie smiled. "With another sample?" Krivnex's faceplate shifted. "No, next time I am bringing lunch." He boarded without turning back. Jamie stood there for a long while, the wind biting at his jacket, fingers curled around the still warm thermos Krivnex had left behind. The forge would be cold for a few more days. But it wouldn't stay cold forever. Spring rolled in like someone cracked open the sky and let the sun tumble out. The snow melted in sluggish waves, soaking into the pockmarked ground around the forge. The anvil sat quiet under its awning. A few lengths of steel leaned against the shed, untouched since Krivnex's departure. Jamie still caught himself looking for that hulking silhouette in the mornings, half expecting to hear the low harmonic hum he used to make while lining up hammer blows. But silence had a way of teaching its own lessons. Jamie found himself spending more time in the forge. At first, just to keep things clean, organized, but it didn't take long before he was stoking the coals again. Slowly, like easing back into a language he hadn't spoken since childhood. Mike watched from the back steps, sipping his coffee, saying nothing. They didn't talk much about Krivnex. Didn't need to. Until one morning in late April, a long metal crate arrived, no warning, no sender information. Just a simple note attached in alien script with a translation scribbled underneath in black marker. A gift. Try not to cut yourselves. Inside was a blade like nothing they'd ever seen. It was shaped like a cleaver, but narrower, the spine arched ever so slightly. The steel shimmered like dark glass, laced with vein-like patterns that shimmered faintly under light. Along the edge, a subtle blue glow pulsed with every breath of wind. It wasn't Damascus, it wasn't Vorthkal alloy. It was both, and neither. Jamie ran a fingertip along the grain, not the edge, just the surface, and felt it sing. Mike picked it up by the handle, tested the balance. His eyes narrowed. That idiot tempered it with glacial water again. Jamie laughed. Smells like his shop towels too. They mounted the blade in the shop, just above the old charcoal forge, right next to the framed apprenticeship sheet. Visitors asked about it. Mike would grunt, tell half a story. Jamie would offer a slice of that tale, never the whole thing. The whole thing wouldn't fit in words. A few months passed. Jamie found himself forging again, often without realizing when he'd started. The simple stuff came first. Hooks, hammers, horseshoes, even though they didn't have horses. Then knives. Small blades. Folding the steel just enough to see a shimmer in the grain, he didn't aim for perfection. He aimed for purpose. One evening, while working on a set of chef's knives for a local farm-to-table place, Jamie stepped back from the anvil and realized something strange he'd been humming. Not a tune. Just a low harmonic rhythm, rising and falling with each swing. He paused, hand frozen midair. Then smiled. Mike noticed the change too. About time, he said one night, wiping off a set of tongs. You've been dancing around it for months. Dancing around what? Mike looked over. The fire's yours now. Jamie didn't answer, just nodded, turned back to the forge. A week later, Jamie received an invitation digital, encoded, and routed through 3 layers of Terran Alliance diplomatic channels. The sender, Vorthkal Central Forge Consortium. The language was formal, the offer unmistakable. You are invited to demonstrate planetary forge synthesis at the Celestial Craft Convergence. Honorary guest status approved. Travel accommodations prepared. Bring examples. Bring story. Jamie stared at the screen for a long time. Then showed it to Mike. You going? Mike asked. Jamie hesitated. You think I should? Mike handed him a worn leather apron. The same one Krivnex had once burned the hem of. It still smelled faintly of smoke and flux. I think it's your turn. The spaceport was quieter than Jamie expected. The ship sent by Vorthkal was massive, less shuttle, more sculpture, all smooth arcs and humming fields. The pilot wore robes patterned with forged sigils and offered Jamie a respectful bow when he boarded. No fanfare, no announcements. Just quiet efficiency. When the ship docked at Vorthkal's orbital station, Jamie stepped out to a welcome party he hadn't anticipated. Krivnex was there, of course. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood a full line of apprentices. Young, broad-shouldered aliens with nervous expressions and gleaming forge robes. And behind them, rows of smiths from every region of Vorthkal, all standing silent under the starlit sky dome. Krivnex stepped forward. Jamie looked up. You cut your middle plate. Symbolic, Krivnex said. For renewal. They didn't hug, they didn't shake hands, they just stood there for a long moment, sharing the stillness. Then Krivnex pointed. Come, we rebuilt the eternal core. The forge temple had changed. Gone were the solitary fields and stark anvil platforms. In their place stood multi-tiered chambers, each designed for collaborative work. Terran-style forges beside resonance hammers, traditional anvils near anti-grav arrays. In the center, suspended on 4 magnetic lifts, was Twin Hearth. The actual Twin Hearth. Jamie gaped. How did you... Krivnex answered flatly. We took notes. Over the next 3 days, Jamie demonstrated edge-blending techniques, non-quantum fold tracking, and the importance of cooling rhythms in atmospheric environments. He also made grilled cheese sandwiches for curious forge novices using a portable iron pan. Krivnex sampled one, cautiously. Texture is acceptable, he said, chewing slowly. You say that like it's not the best thing you've eaten all week. Krivnex nodded. It is the second best. Jamie raised an eyebrow. And the first? Krivnex reached into his robe and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. Peanut butter and jelly, slightly squished, in a Ziploc bag. I preserved it, he said, for inspiration. On the final evening of the convergence, Jamie presented Kamarai to the assembly. The room dimmed. Projected patterns from the blade's surface were broadcast across the amphitheater ceiling. Waves, lines, fractals, glimmers of something ancient and new, folded into steel. Jamie spoke simply. This isn't just a blade, he said. It's what happens when we stop trying to impress the universe and just talk to it, with fire, with effort, with respect. The hall erupted in quiet chimes, the Vorthkal equivalent of a standing ovation. Later that night, under the Forge Temple's glass canopy, Jamie sat beside Krivnex, both watching the gas giant swirl above. You still call it impossible steel? Jamie asked. Krivnex didn't look away from the stars. No, we have new terms now. Purposeful steel. Harmonized grain. Some say soul-forged. Jamie leaned back. You get many apprentices? Krivnex exhaled through his vent ports. Too many. Half expect quantum shortcuts. The others ask when we'll build a forge with lasers. What do you tell them? Krivnex smiled, a slow, deep gesture that reached his secondary eyes. I tell them to start by sweeping the floor. They sat in silence for a while. Then Krivnex pulled something from a case behind him, a blade smaller, more modest. Not as intricate as Kamarai, but unmistakably earth-forged. The grain rippled with familiar patterns. He handed it to Jamie. I made this, he said. No assistance. Took me months. Jamie turned the knife over in his hands. It was a chef's knife, plain handle, clean lines, balanced perfectly. Not bad, he said. Krivnex tilted his head. I call it Tuesday. Jamie laughed, loud and long. When he caught his breath, he nodded. I think Earth'll be ready for you next time. Krivnex looked down at the forge below, glowing softly in the night. I think I'll bring dessert. And above them, the stars turned slowly, their silent light dancing on the edge of a blade born of two worlds.